Hello, and welcome to Witchy Woman Podcast. I am your host, DaNae Sweet, and this is the first episode of 2023. Mercury Retrograde is in full effect for me. I had some issues with the audio of this recording, but I did my best to edit with the skills that I have, which are very minimal. So it is what it is, and we're just going to roll with it because what choice do we have? So we're starting out 2023 with me being interviewed on my own podcast. Kalem had the idea to interview me and ask questions that he thought you guys might want to know about me. And he even learned some things about me, and he's known me for years. So it was such a fun chat. It always is with him. So I hope you guys enjoy this with guest host Kalem Turner. And you can find him at fortunebykalem.com. You can find him on Instagram as well as Facebook under the same handle, or just go to his website. But he is an amazing tarot reader, intuitive, an amazing palmist. So check his website out, fortunebykalem.com. I also want to say thank you to everybody who is still listening to me, even after I had my long hiatus. And I appreciate you so much. I appreciate any new listeners as well. And just Happy New Year. Happy 2023. This is our 5th year. Like, we're entering the 5th year of this podcast. We have been doing this for 4 full years, which just it doesn't feel real. It feels a lot shorter than that, but a lot has happened in my life and in the world. So it makes things go fast. So anyway, thank you for joining me in the beginning of year 5 of Witchy Woman Podcast.
I think the most important question to start with is, just quickly, not a long-winded answer, how are you? How are you doing?
So much better. So much better. Yes. I gave myself the time to actually get better. So I am better.
Good. Tides are changing. And
yes.
I think it's crazy that it's been 5 years now for the podcast. I didn't know what a podcast was 5 years ago. I was quite late to the game.
It's all right.
Before we get into you, why did you start the podcast? What was your kind of goal with it? Did you just was it just a way of kind of meeting people, having interesting conversations, or did you have like a real agenda for it? So
at the time, I had my physical shop, and I noticed that a lot of people were very ignorant. Like, they would come in and they'd be like, what the hell is this? And they were like, ooh, you're evil. And I realized that once they got in and they understood, like, they asked questions, then they were cool with it. And I also, like, that was part of it. So I wanted to educate them, people who wanted to learn. I was like, you know what? Let's destigmatize some of this stuff. But also, people that came into the shop that had no place before would recognize that there are weirdos out there like them. And they're like, oh my gosh. They felt like they belonged somewhere. So I started the podcast while I was working in my shop as a means to give somebody a feeling of not being alone. Because I feel that's the way I felt. So I didn't want anybody else to feel that way. So that's kind of why I started it. So kind of like, if you can't find your tribe, just start your own. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. That's nice, and sort of help the community, educate, yes, local community, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But I imagine that was really different. Maybe there's sort of like similar themes there in childhood. Do you live up to the name? Were you like a sweet kid, or were you like a spooky child? Like, what were you starting out as? Oh man, I was weird. So I grew up on a ranch as the oldest child. That explains a lot. I have to be, in control of everything. So I was the oldest child, and I was always weird. I saw little dots from very early age, and I called them my friends, and I would tell my parents about them, and they thought I was like, oh, they're imaginary friends, and I would play with them outside and inside, and it got to a point where my parents were discouraging it. So then I played with my dots in the closet at night with the lights off. So, yeah, so I was a weird kid. You know, now, looking back now, I'm sure those were, you know, my spirits that were with me, that were watching over me, and I was playing with them. And that happened until I was way too old to be, like, you know, playing with an imaginary, quote-unquote, imaginary friend. I loved horses. I was a crazy horse girl. I still am. So
you really are.
I am. I was the girl out on the playground that would, like, gallop around instead of playing, like, hide and seek. I was, like, the crazy girl whinnying and hoping someone else would join me. Yeah. I was weird.
Did you have many, again, like, I always think it's interesting to, like, see, especially witches, like, in adult compared to childhood. I mean, often it is, you know, we are the offbeat ones, the weirdos. Did you have, like, a circle of friends, or was it just maybe, you know, I had one friend, or a total kind of lone wolf? What was it for you?
So I was very reserved as a young child. Like I was odd, but very, very introverted. My parents did not get me out and about much because we lived in a very remote area. So I didn't get to play with other kids very much, my cousins, like, at family gatherings. So when I finally got into, like, social situations, I was like, scared. So early childhood, I really didn't have a lot of friends. I had, like, my best friend was my cousin growing up. And then, like, when I got into, like, junior high and high school is when I really became outgoing. Like, it's hard to explain to people, like, I'm an actual introvert, but I did all these things. I was strange. So I was, like, the band nerd. I loved instruments. I was in the choir, and I loved speech and debate and that sort of thing. But I was also a cheerleader, and I played sports, and, you know, my boyfriend was the quarterback, you know, that kind of thing. So I was very, and a part of that is being in a small town. Like, you can't help but kind of be in everything because that's what's expected of you. But I really enjoyed doing all the things.
I didn't know that you were musical in your younger years, or even something I didn't know about you, and I've known you for years now.
Right? I actually went to, when I got out of high school, my major in college was music. I went to music performance. I had a full scholarship.
Wow.
So that's what I'm a, nerd, like, way music nerd. Yeah, and then college hit.
Band camp, but also, like, does everything, and was dating, what did you say, like, the quarterback or something?
Yes, that was my high school sweetheart was the quarterback.
Wow.
Yes.
An unusual romance, but we love it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we even went to college together. I mean, of course, that did not work out, but, you know, we tried.
Do you think you, like, more came into your own being, like, as a character, especially, spiritually? I mean, do you think, was there any of that kind of resonating? And I feel like as teenagers, you know, even teenage witches, it's like we've got too much going on to be a teenager to be anything else. But what was the sort of, like, outside school dynamic for you? Did you have any sort of spiritual practice when you were younger, or kind of life outside of school?
Yes. So as far as, like, my witchy / spiritual stuff, I grew up in a Baptist household, and I don't know if you know it. Yeah. So doom and gloom and, you know, Protestant, you know, shame is what I grew up with. And I really didn't resonate with any of that, and I finally rebelled and wore some crazy things to church one day, and then my parents were like, okay, we're not going to make her do that again. So then I never had to go to church again.
When?
I was about 13 when I did that. This is going to age me incredibly, but the show Blossom, and this might have been earlier than 13. Blossom was out. The girl who plays Amy Farrah Fowler on The Big Bang Theory, that was my childhood. Like, I loved her because she was a big rebel. She played in this show called Blossom, and she dressed funky and had, like, fun hats, kind of like a toned down Stevie Nicks. And I wore an outfit inspired by her to church with my hat and the whole big thing, and that's what got me, like, no more church.
So, I love that, though.
Yeah. I was like, fine, you're going to make me go to church? I am going to cause a scene. So,
expression through fashion.
But as far as my spiritual practice, so I realized that around that age of around like 14 to 16, like I loved the idea of witchcraft and the dark arts and, the mysterious of it all, because I wanted to rebel. Well, duh. So I started finding books on, this is such a nerd, band trips. So our band teacher would take us always to a bookstore when I went on band trips. And so I would go buy, any kind of occult book I could get my hands on and like hide it and then hide it when I went home. So I'd be able to read those things, of course it was like Gardner in the beginning. That kind of, and I wrote, what is it? Silver Wolf or whatever her name was. Remember that? So I read her and I would do those things. But the thing that I remember the most is that I would like have this prayer that I said to me. It was to, like the great mother and the great father, because that's what I was. Wicca is the only thing I get my hands on. That's really all that was in the bookstores in the like early 90s. So that's what I was praying to, and I would ask them to tell my boyfriend, because he drove a very long ways to school, to remind him to drive safe and buckle up. Every day.
That's sweet.
Every day. And one day we were just chatting, and he was like, what's really weird? And because he had the one day he kind of have like a little almost rack, but he didn't. And he was like, what's weird is that, most mornings there's like a voice inside my head that's insistent that I buckle up every freaking morning, because he hated buckling up. He's like, it's a big argument with us. And I was like, wait, what? And to me, that was like proof that my wishes, were earnest enough to be answered. And that changed a lot. And then there was a completely selfish thing that I did. I wished one night, because I didn't have boobs. I was very boobless as a teen. And one day I got mad because all my cousins and all my friends had boobs and I did not. And I was so mad. I went outside during a storm and I'm like, I just want boobs. Give me boobs. And then, puberty hit. But in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm the greatest witch of all. Like, I was like a 13-year-old, like, woo. But it was mostly just playing with Wicca as an early child.
Yeah, well, Wicca woo. I mean, I don't think either of us are remotely Wiccan really, or part of the tradition, but it is often such like a big starting place for people. It really did have a big rise, especially with books and stuff. Great sort of starting place for people to get that.
It was
get that magic moving apparently, and it kind of bleeds into your psychic stuff a little bit. I mean, in situations like that, I'm wondering, like with your boyfriend and the seatbelt kind of thing, I'm thinking like, is that magic manifest? Is that sort of telepathy?
Yeah.
Your mediumship, spirit guides coming in.
Yes.
Probably all of it.
It could have been, a mixture.
Yeah. When did you, because I think these days you do offer more sort of card readings and palm readings, which is great, but a lot of it comes from spirit for you. Would you say that you're a medium or spiritualist? How do you even describe that sort of experience?
So if I had to put a label on myself, I usually say I'm an intuitive medium. I hate the word psychic because it has a lot of different negative connotations in society. Yeah. So I try not to use the word psychic as much when I do like advertising and on my page. I like to use intuitive medium because I can talk directly to spirits, or I can use, guides to be my intermediaries, which when I do someone else, if I'm talking to someone else's spirits, I want to be safe. So I use my team. And they're kind of my interpreters, and they work as my bouncers, in the simplest terms.
That word just came to mind. I've worked with a medium before, and she referred to them as bouncers as well, which is just really cool. Yeah. Did that sort of start to become more apparent in your life in teenage years or college, or would you say it was much later?
Weirdly enough, like it started with animals. I would know, and this is super morbid. One time, like, my sister and I, we were really little. I was probably I don't know, probably 10 or 12, around that age. And we had kittens. And they were, they got fleas or something, and my dad put something on them to kill the fleas, and he didn't know it was bad for them. And they were in the garage because they wouldn't let them come inside because, fleas. And my sister wanted to go see the animals, the kittens, and she was rushing towards the basement door, and I grabbed her, and I was like, don't go in there, because for some reason I saw them dead. I knew that they were dead. So I stopped her and I went and got my parents, and, they took care of it. And then my horse had passed away one time when I was in high school, and I was sitting in class, and I'm like, I had a very bad stomach ache first. I'm like, why do I have a stomach ache? I'm like, this is killing me. And I started thinking about my horse, and I just kept getting images of her. And when I got home, my parents were like, you're basically, she died of a really bad stomach ache. So it's things like that started first with that psychic connection to the dead animals. I think I have a psychic connection to them before they died. My little dog thinks. Do you hear that? He is a menace. So come here, Lulu. So spirit activity has been super, super high in my house because we're moving, and this little dog. Every time my spirits are around, especially when I do this sort of thing, they're all around me, and he barks. So that's just going to happen. Yeah. He's like, Mom, Mom, Mom. So yeah. So it started with animals, and then it went more to people as I got older. I don't think I was ready or focused enough for people until I got probably in my 20s. Come here, buddy. So
in that sort of transition from high school to college, because you did do college.
Yeah.
What was your? I don't want to say what was your sort of life expectations, but how were you kind of leading your life in that way? What were you sort of working towards? Was there a big sort of career plan coming in there? I imagine it worked out differently to how you used to think.
Oh man. So when I went to college, I wanted to become, I wanted to perform, but then I wanted to become a music and art therapist. So psychology. So I wanted to work with little kids, and I wanted to use music and art because I'm also an art nerd. So I wanted to do both. I wanted to kind of use that to help kids express themselves. And that lasted a whole semester because I learned how to do a keg stand. And honestly, I started once I started thinking, taking the psychology classes that were involved, in my curriculum, that's what I really clung on to, is the sociology and the psychology classes. I was like, and if anybody listening, if you're in a music major, your entire day is filled with music classes, whether it's music comp or performance, and then you have small groups that you have to belong to after hours. So I was doing, that's my entire life was just music performance, and I couldn't do it. I was like, I was 18 years old and just could not. I was like, no. It was a lot. Yeah. So I switched majors to psychology. And that's what I wanted to be.
Yeah, it's a very interesting switch. I feel like not just because, you do readings and, witchy women and all that, but I mean, you are Scorpio rising. You should always lean towards the the psychology.
Yep.
I love that we're kind of going in Newman and Scorpio right now. It's your time. Your time to rise.
Yes. Yes. It feels good right now.
Yeah. So what happened with that? I mean, how did studying psychology in college turn into being witchy woman?
So a lot. I mean, I really enjoyed that stuff, and I had transferred schools because I followed my boyfriend to college. And we both made for our age, I think it was a mature decision. At 18, we decided, we had dated since we were sophomores in high school. And we decided that we needed to experience life without each other and see how that went, to see if we were, really meant to be. And of course, I moved schools, and it was not meant to be. And at that school, I just could not focus either, and I ended up moving home and going into the Navy. I know that's like not a very... That's like a total detour. And honestly, the Navy...
Yeah, that's a big turn.
Yeah. Sure. I drank a whole lot and was very wild in college because in my younger years, my parents were very, very strict with me. They were wild as hell. Like, they were 60s and 70s children. So they, like, you know, were wild hippies. So when I came along, they're like, we're going to shelter her. So when I got free time and freedom, I'm going to experience everything. And, like, the true Gemini in me, like, blossomed. She experienced anything she possibly could. Yeah. So I joined the Navy because I wanted to get away again and experience life. My spiritual decisions were being definitely, you know, pushed down by my parents. They knew what I was into. And it's one of those things, if you grew up in a super conservative household, it's like they don't want to admit it out loud. They're not going to tell you, we disapprove of you diving into the occult. They would say things like, would you like to go to church today? We see the books you read. It's very like, you know, behind the back. Anyway, so I just got tired of it and I wanted to explore the world. I wanted to see other people and know what spirituality was like in other places. I mean, there were other reasons why I joined the military, and it was a very rash decision. I had gotten just tired of all the bullshit, and I opened the phone book at the time, because that's what we had, were phone books. I opened the phone book, yeah, and I found the Navy recruiter. I called them up. I signed some papers, and 10 days later, I was in boot camp. So...
Wow.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yes. So it's a long journey till I come back to my spirituality side. I was very mad during that period that it seemed like every time I would try a new venture, nothing would work out. So at that period in my time, I was pissed. I was so mad at the world. I had a lot of issues with my parents, a lot of issues with ex-boyfriends and things like that, and I was just pissed off that I could devote time and energy into a spiritual practice and still get shit on. And that's a very immature way to think about life, but I was, you know, at the time, like 20, 21. So, yeah. I was mad. So I pretty much was like, I don't want to do spirituality at this point. I just want to go, you know, travel the world, experience other things. Maybe I'll find my spirituality doing that, or find myself. I just didn't know who I was. So that was my solution. Screw it. I don't know what to do. Let's start over.
Yeah, I suppose in a way it was like, oh, I've been going inward for a while to really explore, you know, my own spirit.
Yeah.
Didn't really work out the way I wanted it, so now I'm just going to go outwards and really kind of take it to the extreme. I mean, do you think in a way it was sort of good for you? I had an uncle who was in the Navy, but he never talks about it. Like, it must have been amazing. I mean, was there anywhere that you went or anything that happened during that time that really, you know, you think, well, that was profound, you know, that was an experience that I would really take away from it?
I mean, my military experience probably didn't have a whole lot to do with my spiritual stuff, but it put me in a place in my life and surrounded me with the people and the person that changed the entire direction of my life. While I was stationed in San Diego, I liked it there so much because, you know, it's the perfect temperature. I mean, who doesn't like San Diego? So it's beautiful. So I ended up, after the Navy, accepting a job working as a civilian contractor. And so I had a very cushy life because money is good in that sector. And so I had horses, and it's expensive to have horses out there. So I had horses, and I had a lot of horse friends. And I met one person in particular. And I've talked about her before. Her name was Amber. And she was I think she was just a year maybe younger than me. And this is like so we were like 26, 28 at the time. around now. So I'm out of the Navy, but I'm still doing the things that I did in the Navy, but I'm just doing it as a civilian. And I met this woman, and we just had the greatest time. We had the greatest, tightest circle of friends. And then I'm still, mind you, not really doing spirituality at this point. I'm still like, screw the afterlife. There's nothing. I'm probably the closest to an atheist I could possibly have been. She ended up getting breast cancer, and then it spread everywhere. And she had to go into hospice. And one day I was driving to work, and I literally was about to take my exit, and I just thought, nope, I gotta go visit Amber. So I went to the hospice, and it's weird because all of us were there. Our entire friend group was there at the hospice in her room. And I'm like, this is weird. They're like, yeah, we just wanted to visit her this morning. I'm like, cool. So I'm sitting there, and we're all just reminiscing. She was, couldn't communicate at that point. She was on morphine and just in a lot of pain. So we were there doing her nails and kind of just being with her. And we were reminiscing, and I was holding her hand, and she passed away while I was holding her hand. And it was a profound, that moment was probably the most profound moment for my spirituality, because in that moment, me being pissed and almost an atheist, there's nothing afterwards, my brain knew that her heart stopped. I could hear the monitor going, lining out, going beep. There was nothing. And I knew she was still there. I had this overwhelming just knowing that she was sitting on the side of the bed, looking at all of us, pleading for us not to be sad. And I'm like, I cannot not believe in the afterlife and know this is happening. I had the biggest cognitive dissonance moment ever at that moment. I was like, these two things cannot exist at the same time. I cannot not believe things and know that she's sitting here still. And that changed everything. She haunted my ass. She stayed with me. She visited all of us. We all had visitations, clear visitations from her for quite a while. And she still will pop up in readings for me when I have somebody else do a reading. She changed everything. I knew that there was an afterlife. It's just everything went click back into place. I knew that she was there. I knew that I could speak to her. I knew that if I wanted to, I could speak to my deceased grandfather. It just all lined up like a Rubik's Cube, that last little in the Rubik. That was my moment. And if I hadn't have gotten pissed off at the world and joined the Navy and spent a whole, my tour there, I would have never met her, which was one of the best blessings of my life. I would have never had my spiritual moment, and I wouldn't have ever been who I am now. I know I wouldn't have been.
Yeah, it's a big sort of full circle moment, and for such a sad, what would be perceived.
It was, yes.
It is a sad moment in a way, but
yes.
To have such almost like it's lifting the curtain up rather than curtain call.
Yes.
Which is how a lot of people would think of it. It's
yes.
almost like the reverse.
It was.
You. To go on, almost as a different person, but, with her by your side.
Yes.
It's really cool.
Yeah. It was just mind-blowing moment for me. Every time I think about it, it gives me goosebumps.
Just living with it every day.
Yeah.
So after, I guess that was kind of what I said before, it's kind of the curtain going up on you as full-blown, I don't want to use the word witchy woman all the time, but it is a good descriptor for you.
It is. Yeah. It is.
So that would have been, how old are you now?
I'm 43. I was 28 at the time that happened. 28, 29. I think it might have been 29 because she was a year younger than me.
Yeah, so big gap between then and now.
Mm-hmm.
What's happened? I mean, that sort of moment.
So,
what else kind of came up with it?
So, everything is just my whole life changed. So, in that moment, I knew that what I was doing for the government wasn't what I wanted to do. I didn't like what I did, and I was good at what I did, and I enjoyed the puzzles, and I enjoyed using my brain. Like, that part of my job was fascinating to me. But I felt like I wasn't right. So I quit. I quit within like 2 weeks. I was done. I didn't want to do it anymore. It made me feel physically ill to think about going to work. I'm like, there's something else for me. So I quit. And then I found a job in my town that I lived in at a drug rehab facility. It was, yes, as a house manager. So I was there to round them up, and we did like group therapy. Like, I didn't do it, but I would, supervise and get everybody together. I would drive them all to AA. We would go on nature hikes. I helped do activities, and, it was just a very fulfilling job. I got paid shit. But
it's a good thing to do.
But I was like, okay, so for me, I'm like, that was a big aha moment. I'm like, this is crap, and I, I'm not getting paid anything, but this is so much more fulfilling. Like, I can wake up and want to go to work and want to connect. And that's the thing, I wasn't connecting with anybody at work other than for work. And at this job, I was connecting to people on, a deeper level. And it was a facility where they encouraged all spiritualities. And one of the counselors there just happened to be a pagan.
Oh, cool.
And they encouraged different perspectives on spirituality. So her and I talked quite a bit. And she kind of helped me get reinvested in my witchy part of my life. Not just the mediumship part or the spiritual part, but the mediumship or the witchy part, the thing that I started out with in the beginning. So I started to do that a little bit more. And then I was in a very abusive relationship. Very. And this is not the right thing to do, kids, but I decided that I wanted to move home back here to Nebraska because my dad needed help on the ranch, and I wanted to have Maddie grow up in a smaller area. We'd had like a murder and kidnappings and all kinds of things in our neighborhood, and I was like, we're done. I don't want to be here anymore. And we had gotten like, if anybody's from Southern California, the fires are bullshit, and it's scary. And we had 2 of them where I had to evacuate. All of our it's awful. So I was like, I'm done. So I intended for him to stay and me to move, and that didn't happen. I was too afraid to tell him no. So in 2010, we moved here with him. And eventually I got here and I healed, and I started really diving into witchcraft and studying and perfecting things. I mean, I had been doing this on and off since I was like 13, but I really dove in hard, and I think I just got my power back, and I sent his ass packing back home. And I think that's like moving home. Like, I miss the city. Oh, I miss the city so much sometimes. But moving home really healed me, and it gave me the strength. I couldn't have kicked his ass to the curb if I didn't have someone, my family, somebody to lean on. And I had my dad here to help me get rid of this guy. So that helped.
So who was next? When did you meet
Brad?
Husband.
So I met Brad. So we're a cliche. So when I moved here, not too long after I moved here. So my dad is a musician.
It runs in the family.
It does. Nice. It does. My grandma taught him how to play the guitar, and then so it's a big We're a musical family. So he's a musician, and a local band was looking for another singer, and they had contacted him, and so I went with him to their practice thing, and Dad's very much he is the show, And he wasn't really, vibing with the whole, like, having a whole band and having to share vocals and things like that. Yeah, love my dad, but yeah. So, they asked me if I wanted to sing a couple songs, and from then on, I just joined their band as a vocalist, and my husband is the bassist. So we were friends for 2 years while we were in the band, and then started dating, and then we've been together for 9.5 years.
Ooh, coming up on the big one.
Yep.
What they call like a 10-year anniversary. You know how they have like a...
Oh, yeah.
Or a metal... Is it Ruby?
It might be.
I'm really off with those, but you'll have to figure out.
I am terrible about that stuff. Like, Brad and I are very casual about those things. We're like, hey, it's our anniversary, and we're like, high five, and, maybe go out to dinner later.
Right.
Yeah. So, we're pretty casual about that kind of stuff. I mean, even our wedding was in my grandma's backyard, because I like the roses and the lilacs.
That's super sweet, though.
I loved it. It was perfect.
Yeah, I think that's really romantic.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
More than like having it in a church or something.
Oh yeah, we knew.
Backyard with the flowers.
Yeah, we had a backyard and the flowers. My grandma, we had a woman do a hand fasting that I wrote for the whole. I wrote the ceremony and she did it. It was a hand fasting, so it was a pure pagan ceremony. Complete with like everybody got. We had like an herbal bundle to bless all of us. And my grandma, the best picture of our entire wedding is this woman. Imagine this woman in a beautiful, like, flowy, like, muumuu gown thing. And her hair is wild and gray and everywhere. And then there's my grandma, my church-going, very conservative grandma. I wanted her to be my maid of honor. So, because she's like my mom, she raised me. So she's there, and the picture is my grandma like looking up and sniffing while this crazy looking woman is like pushing the smoke from the bundle onto my grandma, and my grandma's just like breathing it in and loving every minute of it. It was beautiful. Yeah.
Little smoke plants for grandma.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome.
To run up to now, I mean, another aspect of you, just another aspect, is there's so multifaceted. I guess another face of the Gemini part of you is writing, because you've written books. I mean, are you still writing? What have you been writing? How's that going? So
I'm still writing. I also have like fear of other people reading my writing, so no one gets to read it, but I have 2 books. One of them is about my experience at my ranch, my family ranch, and that's like a whole other thing. There's a bad thing that lives there that is not human. I know it sounds really crazy out of like a storybook, but I'm actually writing what happened to us. That's why we moved away from that house. That's why I'm in this house right now. It like tormented me to the point where I would wake up underneath my bed. Like I would be crawling. I would have like my hands in the carpet, like digging into the carpet, trying to like crawl away from I remember waking up just screaming because the thing would have a hold of my legs and I would be crawling.
Demonic movie shit.
It was. Sure. And we lived through that and it was horrible. So I'm writing about that whole experience and what that was like. And then I also have a book that I started before that. So I've been going around to different religious people, leaders, clergymen, Buddhist monks, and I asked them a series of questions that are like the same questions. And I want them to answer to see what the differences are in different faiths. Because my premise, I believe, this is just my take on spirituality. I think that spirituality and God, or whatever the heck you want to call it, I think that when a Buddhist is praying, or when a Christian is praying, or when I am honoring one of my deities, yes, I'm honoring something very specific, but it's the same. It's a facet in a large, like think of a big old diamond, and all the facets are like all of the different deities and entities and the things that humans have decided to name a deity or to honor. So in the scheme of things, if you take all the labels and all of the things out, like, are we praying to the same thing? Are we trying? Yes. Are we praying to one drop in a giant ocean, and that drop is the ocean? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's the same idea, if you're kind of like a new ager out there, if you appreciate the perspective of source or oneness or the universe, uni being sort of one, just different reflections of it. Yeah. I think even a lot of, more like in the witch communities and pagan communities, people are more leaning towards that. I think it very much, it's more like in the more common Abrahamic religions, you could say like Christianity is vodka, maybe Islam is, I don't know, rum, whiskey, but spirituality is more like a cocktail of, all these different drinks, but at the end of the day, they're all water-based.
Yes, exactly. Yes, no, that's exactly, I think that entities, deities, they're very much a real thing, and but it's one part of a whole, and it's just interesting to see the different takes on spirituality from different clergymen and different holy people. So that's what I've been doing.
That is cool. I can't actually, I'm sure there's studies and stuff.
There are.
I can't really think of any books that I've read out there that just sort of come at it from like a comparative study. And see where they link up, see where they don't, and what that kind of means. So that's cool. Yeah. So what's next? What are you going to do next? Life ahead.
So my goal is to finish. I want to finish the book about the house and our experiences there. So that one is so close to being finished. I have like the fear of finishing it, because then that whole writer's like conundrum, because then somebody has to read it, and I am terrified of that. So that's I want to finish that by the first quarter next year. I'm not going to start on that until this year is over, because there's just so much going on until the year is over. So that I want done. We are changing things in the Coven a little bit to be a little more interactive, and so I don't have to miss out on my actual life, because during my time of being away from the podcast, that's what I learned. I have dedicated most of the last, majority of the last 4 or 5 years to this podcast and to the Coven, and I love serving others, but I forgot that I have to have a life too.
Yeah.
So we're going to have more activities in the Coven. It's just not going to always be run by me. I will still be active in the Coven. I'll still be doing some things, but I have delegated the people that I trust, that are knowledgeable and willing to help out, and I am so appreciative for them. That way I can do the part that I really like, that I want to connect with more people. I want to do this podcast more, and I want to be able to do the readings and do all these things, and not have to have my schedule so full that I have nothing left for me, and then I'm just setting myself up for burnout again. So I like my life. I have a muggle life too. Like, I have horses and ponies, and I want a hairy cow so bad. I'm trying to get Brad talked into it. I want a hairy
That's not muggle life. That's probably the most magical part. I think it's so cool.
Right?
It's that I know, like, every time I speak to you, you're just with the animals, whether it's the horses, the dogs, always tending to others' needs, whether they're animal or human or
my plants. Or my plants. Like, I love...
Or the plants. Yes. Can't forget about the greenery.
I love growing plants and having my house full of those. That's, like, very rewarding. And so I'll be able to do a little bit more of that. Like, before I got super burnt out, I was cross-pollinating things and making, like, doing mad scientist things. And I wanted to go back to doing that. So I'm excited.
I forgot. You've even got like a little poison garden. I remember seeing
I sure do.
You were growing some belladonna. That was very nice.
I do. I remind my husband often that I have many substances in my house that don't come up in a regular toxicology report. So
behave, Brad.
Behave. Yes.
Well, thanks for giving us a little timeline of your experience.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you wanted to chat about? What's on your mind?
Not much. I want to remind everybody, get off social media every once in a while. Like, I have to do that myself. I have to put down my phone and then leave the house. Because if I take it with me and say I'm going to stay off of it, I won't. Because I want to be on it and I want to know what's happening with the world. So, get off social media. Go do something that's not related to what's going on in the world. Like, go sit with your plants, or if you have an animal or anything, go read a book that's not witchcraft related. If you're a witch like me, I have a to-read pile that is like almost as tall as me. So, but none of those are fiction. None of them are fun. None of them like let my imagination go. And that's one thing I learned during this hiatus, is that I need stimulation outside of facts and outside of my studies. Like, have some fun, because shit is going to get very serious for us here in the next 2 years. And we don't want to burn out. We don't want to lose our magic. And I think that's what happened for me, is I lost my magic because I was so scared of what was happening in the world, because I was looking at it every day. And I don't want to like say, don't be aware of what's going on, because I think you should be, but you can't doom scroll all day. It's overwhelming.
That's some real advice, like, especially for like, people do lose their magic, and people are so, it's happened to me before. Like, I've lost the ability to read as well. You know, and when it's your job, it's really stressful, but don't forget to enjoy life. Like, go hug a tree, get a massage, get off the phone, put it down. Like, it needs to happen. As sort of maintenance, you know, as a person. Yeah, we covered some good ground. Well, thanks for enlightening us on a day in your life, or not a day, many days in your life.
Yes. Well, thank you for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. I think that sometimes I think of myself as only a witch, and what I've realized is I am a lot more. I am more than a witch.
You're apparently a lot of fucking things. I didn't even know you were some of that stuff. So, Jesus.
But I want other people to think they are too. Like, you're not just a witch. You're not just a mom. You're not just, a worker. You're everything. You're so much more. You're whoever the hell you want to be. I'd like to say thank you again to Kalem Turner for being an amazing guest host and an amazing friend. Check him out again at fortunebykalem.com. You can find him on Instagram and on Facebook at Fortune by Kalem. So check his sites out. Give him some love. Book a reading, palmistry. He does natal charts as well as tarot. And I have partaken in his services that he offers, and I am always amazed each time I get a reading. So highly recommend. That's all I got until next time. So look out for this podcast and all of the new things that we are going to be having rolled out in the next month or so. So, that's it. So until next time, stay witchy. Bye-bye.